Imagine working your hardest day in and day out, pushing yourself to your limits, only to have your efforts thrown back in your face. You pour your energy into your job, knowing that if you just keep moving, you'll get there. But when the day comes and your boss tells you, flat out, you're too slow, your world comes crashing down. It's the ultimate insult, one that cuts deeper than just a performance review. It's a personal blow, a message that no matter how hard you try, it's never enough. This is exactly what happened to Kate, a woman who found herself standing on the edge of something unexpected after being fired from her job for being too slow. But here's the twist: what she did next. Well, that's what makes this story one of the most unforgettable tales you'll ever hear. I promise, you won't see it coming, and neither did her boss. In fact, when Kate took matters into her own hands, it shocked her entire workplace, and it just might surprise you too. Stick with me as I take you through the journey of how a single woman turned what seemed like a devastating moment into something that left everyone speechless. The question we'll explore here today is, what happens when someone who's been told they're not enough decides to prove that they're more than capable of standing on their own? You're about to find out. Now, let's pause for a second and think about it. How many times have you heard someone tell you, you're too slow, or you can't do it? Or maybe, in your own life, you've had moments when you've felt overlooked, underestimated, or even dismissed by people who were supposed to support you. It stings, doesn't it? But what if you had the power to turn that sting into something more powerful, something that might just change your life, and maybe even theirs? This story is not just about Kate. It's about all of us. It's about every person who's ever been told they couldn't do something. It's about every worker who's ever been pushed to the edge, told their best wasn't good enough, and yet found a way to rise above it. It's about reclaiming your confidence, your power, and your future. If you've ever felt like giving up, or like the world just wasn't fair, this is the video you've been waiting for. So, stick with me. This story isn't just for the underdog, it's for anyone who's ever felt like their moment was slipping away. Now, back to Kate. She had worked in the same office for over 3 years, and she had always prided herself on her work ethic. She wasn't the fastest, but she made sure every task she completed was done with the utmost attention to detail. Every deadline was met, and she was respected by her coworkers, even if she didn't have the speed that some of her colleagues did. It's hard to argue with someone who's always delivering quality, right? But that's exactly what happened when her boss, Steve, gave her an ultimatum. Pick up the pace or you're out. It wasn't just a warning. It was the end of her career with the company. At first, Kate tried to push harder, faster, but it didn't come naturally to her. She wasn't built to rush through things. She believed in getting the job done right, not in cutting corners or rushing through half-done work. But with the pressure mounting, she found herself in a difficult position. She didn't want to disappoint her family or lose her steady paycheck, yet the relentless demands were slowly taking their toll. How could she possibly compete with workers who were faster, but not necessarily better? And how could she find the strength to fight when the odds were stacked against her? But in the face of being told she wasn't fast enough, Kate made a decision that changed everything. Instead of caving to the pressure and slinking away in defeat, she did something no one expected. And this wasn't just about proving her boss wrong. This was about reclaiming control of her life and her career. She knew deep down that she wasn't just too slow, she was something much more. And she was going to show them all. What did she do? Well, you're going to want to keep watching, because the answer is something you could never have predicted. Her next move left everyone stunned, especially her boss, who thought he had already written her off. But in a world where people are quick to judge, where success is often equated with speed, Kate's actions were a powerful reminder that there's more than one way to get to the finish line. Her story is a testament to resilience, strategy, and the quiet power that comes from refusing to give in. I want you to think about this for a moment. Have you ever been in a situation where you were told you couldn't do something? Where someone doubted you? We all have. But what if the real key to success isn't about racing to the finish line? What if it's about redefining what success really means and playing the game on your own terms? Kate's story will make you rethink everything you thought you knew about work, ambition, and the hidden strength that lies within each of us. So stay tuned, because this isn't just a story about one person's journey. It's about all of us who've been told no, not fast enough, or you can't do it. Kate's story shows us that when you take matters into your own hands, even the most unexpected outcomes are possible. Don't go anywhere, because I promise you won't want to miss what happens next. But here's the kicker. Kate wasn't the only one who had a lesson to learn from this experience. Her boss, Steve, had no idea what was coming. And trust me, when you find out what happened next, you'll be left speechless. What Kate did shook up more than just her job. It changed the way everyone around her saw her. So what exactly did she do? Stick around, because the twist is coming up and it's going to leave you wondering, what would you have done in her shoes? As we continue, let's take a step back and dive into the life Kate had built before everything came crashing down. She had always been a hard worker, but there was more to her than what met the eye. Kate wasn't just someone trying to get by. She had dreams, big ones. She wanted to climb the corporate ladder, make something of herself, and prove that she was more than just a cog in the machine. But, despite her ambition, she had found herself trapped in a cycle that seemed to push her further and further down. Her boss, Steve, had always been a tough character to work with. He was the type of manager who valued speed above all else. Quality was secondary, and efficiency was king. Kate had seen it from the beginning, but she thought she could adapt. She believed that with time, she could show him that being thorough, being careful, and taking the time to do things right was just as important as rushing through tasks. She could be both fast and precise, she told herself. But over time, it became clear that wasn't enough. No matter how hard she tried, no matter how much she pushed herself, there was always someone faster. And that's where the cracks started to form in her confidence. The more she tried to keep up with her colleagues, the more she realized she was falling behind. The other workers, especially the younger ones, had a natural speed that Kate just couldn't match. They were quick, they knew how to streamline their work, and their constant hustle was something she admired, but it also made her feel like she was constantly running to catch up. It didn't help that Steve had a particular soft spot for the fast workers. They were his favorites, the ones he'd call out in meetings to praise. They were the ones he'd rely on when he needed results, the ones who were always first to finish their assignments, while Kate lingered behind. It wasn't that Kate wasn't capable, it was just that her rhythm wasn't the same. She wasn't built to rush through tasks for the sake of speed. She cared about precision and didn't believe in cutting corners. She'd rather take the time to do it right, but in Steve's eyes, that was a flaw. It wasn't long before the tension between them started to boil over. Kate felt like she was drowning in pressure, trying to live up to impossible expectations. And the more Steve pushed her, the more she felt herself slipping. She'd leave the office late at night, exhausted and defeated, wondering where she went wrong. On paper, she was doing everything she was supposed to do. She showed up early, stayed late, and gave her all. But at the end of the day, all that seemed to matter was the clock, how quickly she could finish, how fast she could deliver. And no matter how much she tried to keep up, it wasn't enough. Steve made it clear time and time again that speed was the only thing that mattered. What Kate didn't know was that Steve wasn't the only one watching her. There were whispers in the office, murmurs behind closed doors. Some of her coworkers, the ones who moved quickly, began to feel the pressure too. It wasn't just about working faster, it was about proving they could stay ahead, that they were the ones who could keep up with Steve's demands. There were even rumors about other employees being let go for the same reason Kate was being pushed. But something about this situation felt different. There were other dynamics at play that Kate didn't fully understand. People in the office had their own ambitions, their own motives, and it seemed like everyone had a hand in shaping the story of her downfall, whether they realized it or not. Take Amanda, for example, her closest colleague. They'd worked together for years, sharing lunches, venting about the daily grind. But lately, Amanda had become distant. She had started spending more time with Steve, looking for opportunities to prove her value to him. Kate had noticed that Amanda was picking up the pace, pushing through tasks with the kind of speed that Kate could never replicate. She was catching Steve's eye more and more. Kate didn't want to feel jealous, but it was hard not to. In the past, they'd been a team, supporting each other through the grind. But now, Amanda seemed to be playing a different game. And as Kate's struggles began to mount, she started to wonder if Amanda knew something she didn't. Was Amanda somehow involved in her sudden downfall? Did she have a hand in the decision to push her out, or was she just trying to survive like everyone else? Then there was James, the quiet one who had always kept to himself. He never spoke much in meetings, and his work was consistently top-notch. There were rumors swirling that James had a connection to higher-ups in the company, connections that might explain how he always seemed to be the first one promoted, the one always praised for his performance. It was hard to pinpoint, but there was something off about James' success. He didn't just get ahead because of his work ethic. There were whispers that he might be playing a different game altogether. Was he playing the political side of the office, ensuring that those who were slow, like Kate, didn't have a chance to succeed? Kate couldn't quite put her finger on it, but something about James' rise seemed too smooth, too calculated. And let's not forget Steve himself. He was always calculating, always watching. Was he genuinely focused on getting results, or was there more to his leadership style than met the eye? Kate had started to wonder if Steve was less interested in the work itself and more interested in controlling the narrative. Was he grooming certain employees for something bigger? Maybe he had his own agenda, one that wasn't as clear to the rest of the office. As the days passed, Kate started feeling like she was a pawn in a game she didn't even understand. And while she kept trying to do her best, she couldn't shake the feeling that there was something larger at play, something she wasn't seeing. With all these potential suspects and shifting allegiances, it became harder for Kate to figure out what was really happening. Could it be that her firing wasn't just about her performance at all? Was there something else at play, something deeper than mere speed and efficiency? The day Kate was let go, she felt like the rug had been pulled out from under her. The shock of the moment was overwhelming, and it took everything in her not to break down right there in the office. But instead of succumbing to the hurt, she did something that nobody could have predicted. She walked out of that office with a plan, and it wasn't just about finding another job. No, Kate wasn't done yet. What she had in mind would shake Steve to his core. And trust me when I say, you'll be shocked by how she did it. Stay tuned, because what Kate did next was more than a comeback. It was a move that no one saw coming. And as for the rest of the office? Well, things would never be the same again. What happens next will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about the world of work, power, and redemption. So hang on tight because the real story is only just beginning. As Kate began to plan her next move, she quickly realized that things weren't as simple as she thought. The moment she was fired, she assumed that finding out the truth behind her dismissal would be a straightforward task. All she had to do was connect the dots, figure out if it was truly about her performance, or if there was something more to the story. But, as with any journey of uncovering the truth, things started to get complicated in ways she couldn't have anticipated. At first, Kate thought her best chance at getting the answers she needed was to confront the people closest to her, her coworkers. Amanda, the one she had always seen as a friend, was the first person Kate reached out to. Maybe Amanda knew something. Maybe she'd seen something that could explain why Steve had made such a harsh decision. But when Kate tried to bring up the subject, she was met with an unexpected coldness. Amanda's responses were short, almost as if she was trying to distance herself from Kate's situation. Her eyes darted around, and there was an almost palpable sense of unease in her demeanor. It was as if Amanda knew something she wasn't willing to share. When Kate pressed her further, Amanda suddenly became defensive, insisting that she had no idea why Kate was fired. The strange part was how quickly Amanda shut the conversation down, telling Kate, "Maybe you just weren't cut out for this kind of work anymore." Those words hit harder than anything else, as if Amanda had been told to say them. Kate didn't buy it for a second. There was something off about the way Amanda was acting, something wasn't right. With Amanda being no help, Kate turned to her next potential ally, James. He had always kept to himself, but there was something about him that made Kate feel like he could be trusted. After all, James had always been the type to do things by the book. He worked hard and seemed to be one of the few people who genuinely cared about the quality of his work. So, Kate reached out to him, hoping for a breakthrough. But again, what she got was nothing like what she expected. James' response was even more suspicious than Amanda's. He seemed genuinely concerned about her situation at first, but as the conversation progressed, his tone changed. It was subtle, just a shift in his body language, a slight hesitation in his voice, but Kate could tell he was holding back something. When she asked him if he had any idea why she had been let go, James gave her an answer that seemed almost rehearsed. "It's just business, Kate. You've got to accept it and move on." His words didn't sit right with her, and as the conversation ended, Kate couldn't shake the feeling that James knew far more than he was letting on. Determined not to give up, Kate decided to dig deeper. She started going through the office files, checking old emails and documents that she had access to. One night, after everyone had left for the day, she sat alone in the empty office, scrolling through emails and memos, hoping to find something, anything, that would lead her to the truth. That's when she stumbled upon a strange email chain. It was an exchange between Steve and someone higher up in the company. The subject line was innocuous enough, something about performance reviews, but when Kate opened the email, her heart skipped a beat. The emails were discussing her, specifically her performance, but not in the way Kate had ever been told. There were comments about her being too slow and not meeting expectations, but buried in the middle of the thread was something far more concerning. Someone, probably Steve, had written, "We need to make an example out of her to push the rest of the team." The words hit Kate like a punch in the stomach. She had always assumed that her firing was about her speed, her work ethic. But this was something else. This was a deliberate move to remove her, to show the rest of the office what happens when you don't conform. Kate's blood ran cold. It wasn't just about her being slow, it was about her being a scapegoat. Just as she was about to take a screenshot of the email and document the evidence, something strange happened. The file vanished. It wasn't just deleted, it disappeared. One minute it was there, sitting on her screen, and the next it was gone. Kate tried to find it again, searched through every folder, checked the trash, but it was like the file had never existed. Her heart raced. How could this happen? She knew she had seen it with her own eyes, but now there was no trace of it anywhere. Someone had erased it, and that realization sent a shiver down her spine. Was someone watching her? Was there someone in the office who didn't want her to uncover the truth? Kate felt like she was being pulled deeper into a web she couldn't escape. She had been so sure of herself, so certain that she could uncover the truth, but now it felt like someone was always one step ahead, blocking her at every turn. But the obstacles didn't stop there. The next day, Kate received an unexpected phone call. The voice on the other end was unfamiliar, but the message was clear. "Stop digging. It's not worth it." The call ended abruptly, and Kate sat there, holding her phone, her mind racing. Who had called her? What did they know? It wasn't a random call. This was someone who was watching her every move. Someone who wanted her to back off. As if that wasn't enough, Kate's car was broken into the very next week. She hadn't left anything of real value inside, just a few papers related to her research on the office's internal workings. When she opened the glove compartment, everything was gone, her notes, her printouts, even a few personal items that had no real significance. Kate was no stranger to misfortune, but this was different. It felt like someone was systematically trying to erase her trail. She couldn't figure out who was behind it all. The thought that someone in the office had been watching her all along, manipulating events to keep her from discovering the truth, was almost too much to bear. But she wasn't ready to give up, not yet. She had to find out who was pulling the strings. And then, just when she thought she had made a breakthrough, a name surfaced. One that she didn't expect, one that seemed impossible. Was it possible that someone she trusted had been playing both sides? Someone who had been in on this all along? Kate's mind raced, but before she could piece everything together, the answer slipped further from her grasp. Whoever was behind all this wasn't just trying to silence her. They were trying to make sure she would never uncover the truth. The deeper Kate dug, the more she realized how entangled everything had become. Nothing was as it seemed, and every answer led to more questions. And the most unsettling thought of all? That someone in her life might have been the one to betray her. Just when Kate thought she was beginning to untangle the web, things took an even more complicated turn. She had been quietly researching and retracing her steps, hoping to connect the dots on her own, But what she didn't realize was that her investigation was beginning to affect the lives of those around her. The first clue came unexpectedly, in the form of a phone call, again an unfamiliar number. But this time, it wasn't Kate who picked up the phone. It was her younger brother, Sam. Sam had always been a quiet, introverted type, not the kind of person who typically found himself in trouble. He worked a simple office job, one that didn't really demand much from him, but he was content. At least, that's what Kate had assumed. But when Sam answered the call, the voice on the other end was as cryptic as the one Kate had received just a week earlier. It wasn't a direct threat, but it was enough to rattle him. "You're next," the voice had said, before hanging up without another word. Sam had been shaken, his hands trembling as he told Kate about the call. He had no idea what it meant, and to be honest, neither did Kate. What could this possibly mean? What was the connection between her brother and the mess she was in? It was too much of a coincidence for Kate to brush aside. Sam didn't have the same connections to the office world as she did. He wasn't even in the same industry. So, why would someone target him, too? It was then that Kate realized she was no longer just fighting for answers about her own situation. This was bigger than her. It was almost like she had inadvertently become a part of something much more dangerous, and now those closest to her were being dragged into it. Sam wasn't the only one who had been affected. As the days passed, Kate began to notice subtle changes in her friends and family. People were acting strange around her, more cautious, more distant, as though they knew something she didn't. And even more unsettling, Kate couldn't shake the feeling that her every move was being watched. But just as she was starting to process what this meant, she received something that made her blood run cold, a piece of evidence that completely contradicted everything she thought she knew. It was a file, one that had been hidden deep within her own email account, buried under layers of archived documents. She had no memory of seeing it before, and at first, she thought it was just a mistake. But as she opened it, she realized that the file contained a meeting transcript from weeks before her firing, an internal company discussion about restructuring and eliminating inefficiencies. It was a generic term, one that could refer to almost anything. But what caught her attention was the name at the top of the document, Kate Anderson. The file wasn't just about performance or speed, it was about her. The discussion outlined steps to remove certain employees who were deemed too slow or too expensive to keep, and there it was, her name, as one of the top candidates for restructuring. But the most chilling part? The date of the meeting was the exact day Kate had received her unexpected phone call. Someone had been planning her downfall long before she even knew what was happening, and this wasn't just about performance. It was a calculated move, a decision made far above her head. And now, the plot was thickening. The stakes were higher than she had imagined. It wasn't just her career at risk, it was her safety. The file, which she had quickly saved to her laptop, vanished just as mysteriously as the last one. This time, though, Kate was prepared. She had backed it up, and when she tried to access the file again, it was gone from her backup as well. It felt like someone had found a way to erase her traces from every angle, every device. Whoever was behind this wasn't just protecting their own interests, they were protecting a much larger secret. And now Kate was right in the middle of it. Desperation began to set in. With every piece of evidence she uncovered, it seemed like two more were taken away. She couldn't even trust the systems in place to help her. Every attempt to expose the truth was being blocked, erased, or altered. But there was no turning back now. If this was going to go down, Kate wasn't going to back out quietly. That's when another twist came. Late one evening, as she was heading home from a meeting with her brother, she noticed a figure standing near her car. It was James. Kate's heart raced. What was he doing here? She had barely spoken to him in days after their strange conversation. He didn't move when she approached, just stood there, as if waiting for her to speak. His face was obscured by shadows, but she could make out the familiar outline of his figure. "I know what you're doing, Kate," he said, his voice low and steady, not betraying a single hint of emotion. Kate stopped dead in her tracks. "What are you talking about?" "I'm not your enemy, but you need to stop looking into this," James warned. "You have no idea how deep this goes. If you keep going, you won't just lose your job, Kate. You'll lose everything." Kate's mind raced. Was he threatening her? Or was he trying to warn her? Something about his words seemed genuine, but there was an undertone of something more sinister. Was James really trying to protect her, or was he part of the conspiracy all along? Before she could respond, he turned and walked away into the night, leaving Kate standing in the parking lot, her heart pounding. His words echoed in her mind. "You'll lose everything."
What did he mean by that?
Was there something he knew that he wasn't telling her? Was he involved in this from the beginning, playing some role she couldn't quite place? Kate had been close before, but now, she was on the brink of something far more dangerous than she had ever imagined. Every time she thought she was getting closer to the truth, more obstacles appeared, more shadows cast out on everyone's motives. Was she truly on the right path, or was someone pulling her deeper into a trap? The danger was escalating, and now, Kate had to decide whether to keep digging for answers, or whether the cost of the truth was too high. And just when she thought she had reached a breaking point, a new message arrived, one that would change everything. The question now wasn't just who was behind her downfall, but what would happen to her if she kept uncovering the truth. The days following her conversation with James were like a blur, but as much as Kate tried to convince herself that everything was just a coincidence, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. It wasn't just paranoia. This was something deeper, a constant, gnawing sensation that someone, somewhere, was tracking her every move. Every time she turned a corner or checked her rearview mirror, she thought she saw the same car following her, a dark sedan that never seemed to pass her on the street. But when she would turn sharply or take a different route, it was always just far enough behind that she couldn't confirm it. The only thing she knew for sure was that it was always there, lurking, watching. The unease in her gut deepened, turning into a gnawing fear that wouldn't leave her. She knew something was wrong. The more she dug, the more she realized that she was no longer fighting for answers about her career. She wasn't even sure who she was up against anymore. This wasn't just a job loss. It was something bigger, something far more dangerous. And with every new discovery, it felt like the stakes were rising higher and higher. One night, as Kate walked through her apartment building, she felt it again. Someone was following her. The echo of footsteps behind her was too rhythmic, too deliberate. She quickened her pace, turning sharply into the hallway that led to her apartment. But when she glanced back, she saw nothing, just the empty corridor. Her heart was racing now, and for the first time, she felt that familiar, chilling sensation of being hunted. She fumbled with her keys, her hands shaking, desperately trying to open the door. But when she finally stepped inside and locked the door behind her, the sense of dread didn't leave. It followed her inside, wrapped itself around her like a cold, invisible cloak. Was this the point of no return? She called Sam that night, hoping to ease the growing sense of unease that was choking her. They had always been close, even when life had gotten tough, and Kate found comfort in his voice. But when she heard his phone ring through to voicemail, a sense of panic washed over her. It wasn't like Sam to ignore her calls. As the minutes ticked by, that panic turned to anxiety. She shot him a quick text, asking him to call her back. Still, there was no answer. She tried again and again, but it was as though Sam had disappeared off the face of the earth. It wasn't until the next morning that Kate's phone rang, but it wasn't her brother's voice on the other end. It was a cold, unfamiliar voice, a voice that immediately made her heart freeze in her chest. "Your brother's been asking too many questions. Now he's going to pay for it," the voice said, and the words hit Kate like a punch to the gut. A sick feeling spread through her as she realized what this meant. Her brother had been dragged into this mess, too. This wasn't just about her anymore, it was about everyone she loved, everyone she cared for. And now, someone was threatening her family. It wasn't just a warning. It wasn't just a scare tactic. His was real. The weight of it hit her hard, and she felt the walls closing in around her. She wasn't just fighting for her career now. She was fighting for her life, and for the lives of those closest to her. In that moment, the realization dawned on her with brutal clarity. She was in serious danger. She wasn't just a pawn in some office politics game anymore. She had unwittingly stumbled into something far darker, something far more dangerous. And now she was in too deep. There was no turning back. The next few hours felt like a blur. Kate tried to keep it together, trying to convince herself that she wasn't just imagining things, that there was still time to figure it all out. But with every passing minute, the danger felt closer, more immediate. Her phone had barely stopped ringing, but every call was either from an unknown number or some voice pretending to be someone she knew. And when the messages started arriving, she knew things had escalated beyond repair. "Stay out of this, Kate. You have no idea who you're messing with," one message read. "Don't think you're safe. We're always watching," another one warned. Each message ratcheted up her fear, but it was the silence that terrified her most. As her mind spiraled further into chaos, Kate found herself second-guessing everything, everyone. Was Sam still safe? Had he been silenced for good? Or was there something even more insidious happening? The gnawing suspicion she'd been feeling for days only grew stronger now. What if someone she knew was involved in all of this? What if they were manipulating her, pulling her deeper into a web from which she could never escape? That night, as Kate prepared to get some sleep, if she could even manage it, she heard a soft knock at her door. Her heart nearly stopped. Who could it be at this hour? Her first instinct was to stay quiet, to pretend she wasn't home. But the knock came again, louder this time, more insistent. She stood frozen for a moment, listening, wondering if she should open the door. Something about it felt wrong. So wrong. Her heart pounded as she carefully approached the peephole, barely daring to peek through. What she saw made her blood run cold. The dark silhouette of a man standing outside her door, his back to the dim hallway light. He wasn't knocking anymore. Instead, he was standing there, motionless, as if he was waiting for something, waiting for her to make a move. In that instant, the gravity of the situation hit her like a freight train. She wasn't just dealing with office politics, or even with people trying to cover up their dirty secrets. She was dealing with something far more dangerous, something far more ruthless. And the scariest part? She had no idea how deep this went, how far the web stretched, or who else was involved. Kate stood there, paralyzed, her mind racing. Was this the moment when everything would finally unravel? She took a step back, her breath coming in short, shallow bursts. The fear that had been growing inside her for weeks finally boiled over. Whatever was waiting outside her door wasn't just a stranger. It was the beginning of something darker. Someone or something was out to make sure she didn't live to tell the truth. And in that moment, Kate realized that the most dangerous part of this whole ordeal wasn't the people trying to silence her. It was the fact that she had no idea who was truly on her side, who was feeding her lies, or who might be playing a much more dangerous game than she ever imagined. The moment Kate opened the door, expecting to find the silhouette of some unknown threat standing on the other side, the last thing she expected was the face that greeted her. It wasn't some ominous figure or shadowy stranger, but someone she knew, someone she thought was on her side. Her stomach dropped as she looked up at the person standing there. It was James. The same James who had been so adamant about helping her find the truth about her firing. The same James who had seemed so genuine when he warned her about the company's shady practices. "James? What are you doing here?" Kate's voice cracked, disbelief flooding her. The man standing in front of her wasn't just any employee, he was one of the people who had always seemed like an ally. The very person who had been guiding her through the investigation into her firing, who had reassured her that they were in this together. But now, with him standing in front of her, everything she thought she understood about the situation felt completely upended. James' face was unreadable, his expression cold. There was no warmth in his eyes, no sign of the friendly, approachable colleague she thought she knew. "We need to talk," he said, his tone detached, almost robotic. He stepped inside without waiting for her response, and for a brief moment, Kate felt the suffocating weight of something terrible building in her chest. This was no longer just a conversation, it was something much darker, something far more dangerous. The door clicked shut behind him, and the silence between them was thick with tension. Kate stared at James, trying to make sense of what was happening. "What's going on? Why are you here? You said we were in this together." I trusted you, she said, her voice shaking now. The feeling of betrayal washed over her like a wave, but still, she couldn't quite place why her gut told her something was off about all of this. James didn't meet her eyes. Instead, he glanced at the floor for a moment, almost as if trying to gather his thoughts. I didn't want it to come to this, Kate. But you need to understand that everything you think you know is wrong. There's more to this than you realize. He paused, as though the words were difficult to say, but then continued. You've been digging in the wrong places. And now you've put yourself and everyone around you at risk. Kate's head spun. The words didn't make sense.
What was he talking about?
She had trusted James more than anyone else in this mess. He had been her sounding board, her ally. And now he was saying that everything she believed was a lie? Before she could respond, he finally looked up, and his gaze was as cold as the air between them. The company didn't fire you because you were too slow, Kate. That was just the cover. They were always planning to get rid of you, to erase any trace of your investigation. You were getting too close to the truth. The truth about the people who were pulling the strings. The ones who've been running everything from the shadows. Kate felt a chill run down her spine. What are you saying, James? Who are these people? What truth? Her voice was barely a whisper now, but her mind raced with 100 different questions, none of them making sense. James sighed, running a hand through his hair. The truth is, you weren't just a random target. They were targeting you specifically. They knew you'd start asking questions. And they didn't want anyone to find out about what's been going on behind the scenes. He paused, as if he was weighing whether or not to reveal more. But it's too late now. They've already taken care of the loose ends. And now, you're part of the problem. You've been digging too deep. Kate's pulse raced, and for the first time, she realized how much danger she was truly in. But what he said next knocked the wind out of her completely. And I'm sorry to tell you this, but I'm part of it too. I'm the one who fed you information. I've been playing you this whole time. It's what I was hired to do. Her heart stopped. She couldn't breathe. The room seemed to close in around her, and she felt like she was drowning. No.
No, you didn't.
You said you were helping me. You said. She stammered, but the words died in her throat. James gave a half-hearted shrug. I didn't have a choice, Kate. I had to keep you in the dark. I had to lead you down this path, make you believe you were onto something big. But the truth is, you were just a pawn in a much larger game. You think the people behind your firing were just trying to cover their tracks?
No.
They've been controlling everything, the decisions, the rumors, the way things play out. And they've been using me to make sure nobody ever gets close to finding out. Kate stumbled back, her mind reeling from the bombshell he had just dropped. She had been played all along. Everything she thought she knew about the situation had been fabricated. The clues she had found, the leads she had chased, they had all been carefully crafted to lead her down the wrong path. Her stomach twisted in knots. So, everything was a lie, she whispered, struggling to wrap her head around the truth. I've been helping the people who wanted to silence me, who wanted to destroy me. She couldn't believe it. The sense of betrayal was overwhelming. She had trusted James, trusted him with everything, and now, he was the one who had been manipulating her all along. James' eyes softened for just a moment, almost as if he felt guilty for the role he had played. But then the mask returned, the cold, detached expression that told her everything she needed to know. I didn't want this, Kate. But you didn't leave me a choice. You should have stopped when you had the chance. Kate felt a sharp pain in her chest. There was no escaping it now. The game had changed. She wasn't just dealing with a corporate cover-up anymore. She was dealing with a network of people who had used her as a pawn, and now they were going to make sure she stayed quiet. The worst part was, she didn't know who to trust anymore. Was there anyone who wasn't playing her? Anyone who wasn't working with them? Just as she was about to speak, James turned abruptly, walking toward the door. Don't try to stop them. It's already too late. Kate's world was spinning. She had thought she was so close to the truth, but now, it felt like everything she believed had been shattered. And worse, there was no one left to trust. Not even the person she had trusted most. The fear crept back, deeper than before. What was she supposed to do now? How could she ever get out of this? As the door clicked shut behind him, Kate was left standing alone in the middle of her apartment, the weight of the truth settling in like a suffocating fog. She wasn't just in danger anymore. She was part of something much larger than she ever imagined. And it was a game she might not survive. The phone buzzed, dragging Kate from her spiraling thoughts. She didn't even have to look at the screen to know who it was. It was the same unknown number that had been calling her for days, each time with a new warning, a new threat, a new piece of the puzzle that she didn't want to solve. She'd ignored the calls before, tried to bury her head in the sand. But now, there was no escaping it. She had to know what they wanted. Her hands shook as she reached for the phone, a mix of fear and anger clouding her thoughts. "Hello," she answered, trying to keep her voice steady, but it cracked, betraying her nerves. A low voice crackled through the line, the tone as calm as ever, as if the person on the other end didn't realize the gravity of the situation. "Kate, you need to listen carefully. There's no turning back now. You've crossed the line, and there's only one way out. You can either stop digging, back off, and walk away, or you can keep going and risk everything. Your safety, your career, and even your life." The voice paused, letting the weight of the words sink in. "It's your choice." Kate clenched her teeth, her heart hammering in her chest. She had been pushed this far, felt this intense weight of the mystery bearing down on her, and now, here it was, the ultimatum she had known was coming. She had always been a fighter, unwilling to back down in the face of injustice. But this time, the stakes were different. This wasn't just about her job or her reputation. This was about survival. But who was this person on the other end? And why was the situation escalating so quickly? Kate took a deep breath, trying to calm the panic swirling inside her. "I won't stop. I won't let them get away with this," she said, more to herself than to the caller. "You can't scare me." A dry chuckle came from the other end. "Oh, we know you're tough, Kate. That's why we're giving you a choice. You've got until tomorrow. Either you walk away, or we make sure you regret ever starting this investigation." The line went dead. Kate stood frozen for a long moment, her mind racing as the last words echoed in her ears. She was at a crossroads, one that would determine the rest of her life. Walking away felt impossible. The truth had consumed her, and she couldn't just let it go, not when so many lives, her own included, were caught up in this mess. But at what cost? If she pushed too hard, too fast, there was no telling what they would do to her. Or worse, to the people she loved. Suddenly, her phone buzzed again, and this time it wasn't a cryptic message or an anonymous call. It was a text from her brother, Dylan, the one person she had leaned on during this entire ordeal. He had always been the one to keep her grounded, the one she trusted more than anyone. But now, seeing his name flash on the screen, she felt a pang of doubt. She had always known Dylan had his secrets. He wasn't the perfect, squeaky clean guy she had believed him to be. But never, not in a million years, did she think he could be involved in something like this. And yet, as she opened the message, her stomach sank. The text was short but clear. "I know what you're doing, Kate. You need to stop. I'm asking you for your own safety. They won't stop until they get you. Please don't do this." Her fingers hovered over the screen, the words searing into her brain.
Stop.
Dylan was telling her to stop. The same Dylan who had been there for her, who had always supported her, was now telling her to give up, to walk away.
But why?
Why would he, of all people, be so desperate for her to back down? What was he involved in that made him so certain that she was putting herself in danger? Kate's heart raced, and the room seemed to close in around her. The one person who had always been her rock was now telling her to step away from the truth. Did Dylan know more than he was letting on? Was he part of the same network of people who had been pulling strings behind her back? Or was he genuinely trying to protect her from something she wasn't seeing? She needed answers. She needed to confront him, to understand why he was so adamant about stopping her. But the thought of confronting Dylan sent a chill down her spine. If she was wrong, if he was involved in this conspiracy, what would she do? What would it mean for their relationship? She couldn't afford to make a mistake. But she couldn't walk away, not now. Just as Kate was about to pick up the phone and call her brother, there was a knock at the door. Her pulse spiked, the air in the room suddenly thick with tension. She froze. Who could it be? Was it James, coming back to finish the job? Was it someone else from the company, trying to intimidate her into silence? She approached the door cautiously, her mind racing as she tried to make sense of everything happening around her. When she opened it, she wasn't prepared for what she saw. Standing on the other side was someone she hadn't expected, someone who should have been a safe haven in all this madness. It was Dylan. But he wasn't alone. Behind him, standing in the shadows, was a tall man in a dark suit, his face hidden by sunglasses. A man who looked like he belonged in the kind of world Kate had been desperately trying to uncover. Dylan's face was tight with something Kate couldn't place. Fear, anxiety, guilt? He didn't even look her in the eye. "Kate," he said, his voice low and strained, "we need to talk." Everything inside Kate told her to shut the door, to run and hide. But her feet were frozen to the spot. This wasn't just a conversation anymore. This was something much darker. Something that was about to pull her even deeper into the web she had unwittingly stepped into. As she stared at her brother, a question hung in the air between them. Was he part of it all, or was he just trying to protect her from forces far more dangerous than she could ever imagine? The door slammed shut behind her, and Kate barely registered the sound. Her entire body was tense, her pulse racing. Dylan stepped inside, but he didn't move toward her, as if he was waiting for something, waiting for the right moment or the right words. The man in the suit, the one who had been lurking in the shadows, didn't speak. He just stood there, his presence heavy, suffocating. Kate's mind was spinning, trying to process the last few minutes, but nothing made sense anymore. Her brother, the one person who had always had her back, was now standing here with someone who looked like he belonged in a high-stakes, underground world, far from the simple life she had always known. "Dylan, what the hell is going on?" Kate's voice trembled with frustration and fear. Her mind was flooded with 1,000 questions, but no answers. "Why didn't you tell me the truth?" Dylan's eyes were dark, and for the first time, she saw something unfamiliar in them, a coldness that sent a chill down her spine. He had always been the kind of guy who wore his emotions on his sleeve, who let his guard down when he was around family. But now there was none of that. He was a stranger to her, and she couldn't figure out how to reconcile the person standing before her with the brother she had known her whole life. "I didn't want you to get dragged into this," he said quietly, his voice tight. "I was trying to protect you." Kate's heart dropped. Protect her? From what? And what was so dangerous that Dylan felt the need to hide everything from her? As she looked at him, the pieces started to fall into place. His reluctance to talk about his past, the way he'd always been so careful with the people he trusted, now it all made sense. But it wasn't just about protecting her. There was more. There had to be more. "What aren't you telling me, Dylan?" Kate's voice grew stronger. She was done playing the victim. She needed answers, and she needed them now. The man in the suit stepped forward, his voice low but filled with authority. "You're too deep in this now, Kate. There's no going back." His words hung in the air, like a warning, a threat, but also a confession. "Your brother didn't tell you everything because he couldn't. We were all a part of it." Kate's breath caught in her throat. The weight of those words hit her like a punch to the gut. A part of it. What did that mean? Who was we? And how far did this go? Her mind raced as the truth began to sink in. It wasn't just Dylan. It wasn't just the company. This was bigger, far bigger than she could have ever imagined. She had stumbled into something that reached beyond her comprehension, something that had its claws deep in the systems and people she thought she knew. "What are you saying?" Kate demanded, her voice trembling, but she refused to let them see her fear. "You're telling me you've been working with them all along?" Dylan's face twisted with regret, his eyes filled with guilt. "I didn't want it to go this far, Kate. I swear I didn't. But once you start, there's no way to pull back. They know everything. They're watching us. Watching you." Kate's stomach churned. She couldn't breathe. "They're watching you." The words echoed in her mind. She had been under surveillance this whole time, and she hadn't even known it. Every move she made, every step she took, had been watched, tracked, manipulated. And all this time, she had thought she was uncovering the truth. But she had just been a pawn in a much larger game. "You need to listen to me, Kate," the man in the suit said, his voice steady and cold. "This wasn't just about your firing. This goes far beyond that. We're talking about a network, an operation that has been in place for years. It's everywhere, everywhere you look. They've infiltrated every part of the system, every part of the economy. This isn't just about your job. It's about control. Power." Kate's mind was spinning. The words were too much to take in, too overwhelming. She had been right to dig deeper, but she had underestimated the scale of what she was dealing with. This wasn't just a company trying to cover its tracks. This was a conspiracy that stretched into every corner of society, a conspiracy that had been carefully constructed, piece by piece, over years. And she had been caught in the middle of it. "But why me?" Kate asked, her voice barely a whisper.
Why did they target me?
"What did I do?" The man in the suit glanced at Dylan, his eyes hardening, as if deciding whether or not to say more. "Because you were a threat. You dug too deep. You were getting too close to something they couldn't let you uncover." Kate's heart sank as she realized the truth. She had been a pawn all along. They had let her get close enough to think she had control, to think she was uncovering the truth. But all the while, they had been playing her, manipulating her. And now, they were telling her there was no way out. Dylan stepped forward, his eyes pleading with her. "Kate, I'm sorry, but you need to get out of this. For your own good. If you keep going, they'll—" But before he could finish, the door burst open again, and Kate's blood ran cold. Standing in the doorway was someone she hadn't expected to see, someone she had thought was on her side. It was Rachel, her closest colleague at the company. But her expression wasn't one of concern. It was one of quiet determination. "You should have listened to him, Kate," Rachel said, her voice smooth but cold. "You should have stopped while you still could." Kate froze. The shock of seeing Rachel here, of hearing her say those words, made everything in her world shatter. Rachel? The same Rachel who had helped her through the hardest days at work, the same Rachel who had always been by her side. But now, standing in front of her, Rachel wasn't the person Kate thought she knew. She was the enemy. Rachel took a step forward, her smile thin and calculating. "You've been a thorn in our side for too long, Kate. And now, you're going to regret not walking away when you had the chance." Kate's mind raced, trying to process what was happening. It wasn't just Dylan. It wasn't just the man in the suit. It was Rachel, too. She had been part of this all along, working behind the scenes, feeding Kate false information, leading her down a path she could never come back from. "Why?" Kate whispered, the weight of the betrayal pressing down on her chest. "Why would you do this?" Rachel's eyes glinted with something Kate couldn't place, something dark and dangerous. "Because, Kate, I'm not the person you think I am. And neither is Dylan. None of us are. You were just another piece in the game. And now, you've outlived your usefulness." Kate felt the ground slip out from under her. The walls were closing in, and there was no way to escape. No way to outrun the truth. They had all been part of it, playing their roles, manipulating her every step of the way. She was nothing more than a pawn, a tool in a game far bigger than she could ever have imagined. And now, with Rachel's betrayal, the final pieces of the puzzle had fallen into place. The conspiracy had swallowed her whole, and there was no way to escape the consequences. Kate stood there, her body trembling with adrenaline, as the weight of Rachel's betrayal settled in her chest like a lead anchor. The walls of the dimly lit room seemed to close in around her, suffocating her. The truth, so elusive just moments ago, was now crashing down on her in waves, and she couldn't escape. The pieces were finally falling into place, but the puzzle had turned out to be something much darker than she could have ever imagined. Rachel, once her confidant, her ally, was standing before her now as an adversary, a villain in this twisted story. And Kate had no choice but to face the final confrontation. "How long, Rachel?" Kate whispered, her voice hoarse with disbelief. "How long have you been playing me? Was it all just a lie?" Rachel's eyes flickered with something that resembled pity. It wasn't personal, Kate. You were never meant to know. You were just a tool. But you got too close, you started to piece things together, and that's when it became dangerous. And now, well, now there's nothing left for you. Kate's hands clenched into fists, her mind racing. She had been manipulated at every turn. Every lead she had followed, every piece of evidence she'd uncovered, had been planted by them. Rachel, Dylan, the shadowy figures in the background. They had been playing her the entire time, pushing her toward this moment, knowing she would never back down. But the question that burned in Kate's mind, the question she could never shake, was why? Why had they chosen her? What was the purpose of all this? Before Rachel could speak again, the door behind them slammed open with a force that shook the room. Kate spun around, her heart racing, expecting yet another betrayal, another twist. But this time it wasn't who she thought. It was Dylan, his face pale, his expression filled with raw urgency. He wasn't just standing there, he was running toward them, as if the very weight of everything he had been hiding had finally broken through. "Kate, get out of here," Dylan shouted, his voice breaking through the tension in the room.
Now.
"They're coming." Kate's breath caught in her throat as she locked eyes with him. "What do you mean? Who's coming? What's going on, Dylan? You said you were trying to protect me. You said you..." But before she could finish, Rachel stepped between them, her eyes cold and calculating. "It's too late, Dylan. You should have known." This was never about protecting her. It was about making sure everything went according to plan. And now, Kate, you're going to learn the hard way what happens when you get in the way of people who have been running the game long before you even knew it existed. The words hit Kate like a slap. Rachel's voice was calm, too calm, as if the storm around them was nothing but a distant memory. But the truth in her words was undeniable. This wasn't about a job anymore. It wasn't about revenge for an unfair firing. It was about something far more sinister, a web of power and control that reached deeper than Kate had ever imagined. And now she was caught in the middle of it, with nowhere to run. "Kate," Dylan said, his voice breaking as he grabbed her arm. "Listen to me, please. I made a mistake. I didn't want any of this. But you need to get out of here, now. I'll make sure you're safe." But before Kate could respond, the sound of footsteps echoed from the hallway, growing louder, nearer. Her pulse raced, her mind screaming at her to move, to do something, anything. It was too late. The walls were closing in, and she couldn't escape. "Run, Kate," Dylan whispered urgently, his grip tightening on her arm. "Get out of here, while you still can." But Rachel's voice cut through the tension like a blade. "There's nowhere to run, Dylan. It's too late. You know what happens now. We all have our roles to play, and Kate's role was always to be a pawn in this game. She just doesn't know it yet." Kate's heart pounded in her chest as the door to the hallway flung open with a terrifying screech. 3 men in black suits stepped into the room, their faces impassive and unreadable. One of them stepped forward, his gaze fixed on Kate. "You're coming with us," he said, his voice flat, void of emotion. "No more games." Kate's stomach twisted as she looked between Dylan and Rachel. The final pieces of the puzzle had fallen into place. This wasn't just a corporate conspiracy. It was something much bigger, something far more dangerous than she could have imagined. And now she was in the center of it all, with no way out. Dylan's face was pale, his expression one of defeat. "Kate, I'm sorry. I didn't want this for you. But you have to trust me. They're too powerful." Rachel sneered, her eyes gleaming with cold satisfaction. "You think you can stop this? You can't. It's already over." Her words were like ice in Kate's veins. In that moment, Kate realized the terrifying truth. She was a part of something that had been planned long before her involvement, and the people around her, her brother, Rachel, had all been playing their parts. She was just a piece in a much larger puzzle. And now, with everything she had learned, it was too late for her to turn back. There was no escape. There was no safe place. She had crossed a line, and the consequences would be far more deadly than she had ever anticipated. But as the men in suits advanced toward her, something within Kate shifted. She was done being a pawn. She was done being manipulated. She wasn't going to let them win. Not without a fight. There had to be a way out, there had to be a way to stop them before it was too late. Just as one of the men reached out to grab her, Kate saw something flash in Dylan's eyes. In that split second, she realized what he was about to do. He wasn't going to let her go down without a fight either. In one swift motion, he turned, knocking the man aside and pushing Kate toward the door. "Run!" Dylan shouted. Kate hesitated for only a second, and that second was all it took. Before she could move, Rachel lunged at her, grabbing her arm with a vice-like grip. The struggle between them was fierce, raw. But in the chaos, a final twist unfolded. Rachel wasn't the one who would ultimately betray Kate. No, that role fell to Dylan, because just as he shoved Kate toward the exit, he whispered, "Get out, Kate.
Go.
I'll handle this." Kate's heart broke as she turned, knowing that the world as she knew it had irrevocably changed. The chase was on, and the stakes were higher than ever. But as she ran into the unknown, one thought echoed in her mind. This wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. Weeks had passed since Kate had fled that night, but in many ways, it felt like a lifetime. The darkness that had once clouded her every thought was beginning to lift, though the scars it had left would never fully fade. Her life had been turned upside down, and in the process, she'd lost everything she had once held dear. Her career, her sense of safety, and, perhaps most painfully, her trust in the people she thought she could rely on. But now, as she stood on the edge of this new life she had slowly begun to rebuild, there was a strange calm that had settled over her. It was as if the storm that had raged inside her had finally subsided, leaving behind a quiet, almost eerie peace. Kate had managed to escape the grips of the conspiracy, though it had cost her more than she was willing to admit. Dylan, her brother, was gone, and though she had tried to reach out to him, there had been no sign of him, no word of his whereabouts. She feared the worst, feared that he might have been silenced for his involvement, or worse, for betraying the very people who had orchestrated everything. The image of him, standing between her and those men in black suits, would forever haunt her. But she couldn't stay lost in what-ifs. She couldn't afford to. As the days turned into weeks, Kate started piecing together the final parts of a puzzle. She dug into the network of people who had been behind the conspiracy, uncovering financial records, secret communications, and a trail of corruption that extended far beyond her former workplace. It was clear now, this wasn't just about a single person's rise to power. It was a vast, intricate operation designed to manipulate, control, and exploit. Kate had been a part of their plan, but she had also inadvertently been the one to bring it all crashing down. The files she had found, documents, recordings, pieces of information that had once seemed like dead ends, were the key to exposing everything. And though the authorities were slow to act, the wheels of justice had begun to turn. The conspiracy was being unraveled, piece by piece. But despite the relief that came with seeing the pieces fall into place, there was still a void inside her. The betrayal, the lies, the manipulation, they had left their mark on her in ways she didn't fully understand. She had been used. She had been forced to face a version of the world she had never known, a version where loyalty meant nothing and truth was just a tool to be bent to others' will. And yet, through it all, Kate had found something stronger than fear. She had found resilience. She had found a part of herself she never knew existed, a part that wasn't afraid to confront the darkness, to stand up for what was right, even when the odds seemed insurmountable. But as the investigation continued, and as more people began to question the system they had long trusted, Kate found herself haunted by one question she couldn't shake. What if Rachel hadn't been the true enemy? What if someone higher up, someone even more powerful, was still pulling the strings, orchestrating events from the shadows? The final piece of the puzzle had not yet been revealed. As much as Kate had uncovered, there was still more that needed to be exposed. And though she had found peace in the chaos, a nagging feeling in the pit of her stomach told her this was far from over. One evening, just as the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting an amber glow across the city, Kate sat alone in her apartment, staring out the window. She had never felt more alone, And yet, for the first time in a long while, she didn't mind the solitude. She had survived. She had made it through the worst of it. But the road ahead wasn't going to be easy. She knew the price of truth. She knew what it meant to stand up for what was right, even when everything seemed stacked against you. Then, as if on cue, her phone buzzed on the table. A message. At first, Kate hesitated, unsure if she was ready to face whatever new twist this was about to bring. But she couldn't help herself. She opened the message, her heart skipping a beat when she saw the name attached to it. Kate, it's not over. They're watching you. Be careful. No signature. No details. Just a warning. A chill ran down Kate's spine as she stared at the cryptic message. Who could it be? Who knew she was still searching? The air in the room seemed to grow heavier, the shadows creeping closer. Kate's mind raced. There was no escaping this. No matter how far she ran, how much distance she put between herself and the chaos that had consumed her, it seemed the conspiracy was far bigger than just one person. The people behind it were always watching, always waiting for the right moment to strike. And they were patient. Kate looked out the window again, her reflection staring back at her from the glass. She had fought for so long to uncover the truth, but the truth had become a double-edged sword. Now that she knew, she couldn't turn away. It wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about exposing everything, tearing down the system that had used her and so many others for its own gain. The path ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. The fight was far from over. And as the night settled around her, Kate made a vow to herself. She would finish what she started. She would find out who was really behind all of this, no matter the cost. Because now, more than ever, she understood the price of silence. And she wasn't going to pay it. The phone buzzed again. This time, she didn't hesitate. It was a simple message, but it sent a chill through her veins. You've been warned. And just like that, the mystery was far from over. The shadows still lingered, and the game, it seemed, was only beginning.